By moving the Oklahoma and LSU games to AT&T Stadium, SMU lost out on a huge opportunity to showcase SMU.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Locked On SMU on this Friday edition. Glad you guys are joining me for this show and for making us your first listen of the day. We are going to talk about that and a whole lot more from this rescheduling, or I guess relocating, of the Oklahoma and LSU games to AT&T Stadium. But first, I want to tell you that our show is brought to you by Mazda. We put the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment. Putting in the work defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. So what we're also going to talk about in this show today is why this game is an example of why we need a sweeping change in college football. I'll tell you what that change is in the second segment. Plus, we'll get to SMU and Syracuse in that game tomorrow afternoon. Why SMU needs to start fast against the Orange. I will tell you about that to close up the show. But let's get back into a topic that drove a little bit more divisiveness than I thought it would. Appreciate all of you guys in the comments that have reacted to the videos, to the shorts, and so on and so forth. That was outstanding. Keep it coming. You'll continue to hear my thoughts as well, but I love to hear yours too. A lot of the comments in favor of rescheduling the game to AT&T Stadium against Oklahoma and LSU is this is a huge branding opportunity. Like, this is a huge opportunity to show off SMU. It is a proof that we are back among the college football's big name, big marketable programs. And to that, I agree. I absolutely agree that this is moving up in the world type problems for SMU, that you're going to be seeing that. I think I said that on the back end of the reaction video yesterday, is that stuff like this could be coming down the pike more and more as SMU begins to reestablish itself among the national scene. So that part is good and true. So it is probably a good thing that you are having these games here, because it does mean that you're getting more and more respect. However, I heard a lot of, well, this is a branding opportunity, an idea for us to expand the brand and whatnot. Yes, but what brand are you expanding? What are you showing to prospective players? What are you showing to recruits? And that's where we diverge opinions here. Because to me, yes, you can have your logo and your helmets out there on the playing field, but you're not going to be able to show off your brand the best when you're doing it in somebody else's house. Remember, Jerry Jones does not have some intrinsic tie to SMU. Jerry Jones is an Arkansas dude, which is why it makes more sense for a game like Arkansas A&M to be played at Jerry World, not SMU Oklahoma or SMU LSU. If Jerry Jones or some high-level executive with the Dallas Cowboys had a tie to SMU, a direct tie that was well-known, okay, you got me on that one. But that's not the case. So if you're SMU, this is not an excellent branding opportunity in terms of telling people, hey, this is why you should go to SMU, because, oh, we're playing in Cowboys Stadium. I don't know. I'm not here for that necessarily. I'll tell you guys a story. So I also cover the University of Oklahoma, and Oklahoma hosted a litany of recruits in their game that they played on prime time against Michigan this past year. A lot of recruits left highly impressed by the scene at the University of Oklahoma. And a lot of why that had to do with the fact that they were impressed was because it was played in Norman at the Sooner Stadium, not in somebody else's stadium. Now, your retort to that might be, well, where else were they going to play? Fair point, but it always helps you really establish your brand, really establish your connection to recruits, really impress recruits when you bring a marquee opponent to town and it's played in your stadium. That is your best opportunity to show off really what being a member of a particular institution is going to look like and what that thrill is going to feel like when it's in the place that they're going to play, 7-8 times out of a season. That's when your best opportunity is, not when you're playing a one-off game in an NFL dome. Now, again, playing games in NFL domes don't bother me on the surface. They don't. They bother a lot more people on the surface than it bothers me. I will still watch the game. I'm not going to complain about the venue once the game comes. But in terms of you're going to get the most out of expanding the brand, that's just not the way to do it. Also, here's another fact. If you say, oh, we're going to play in a great location and we're playing potentially in a national TV game. Okay, number one, this was going to be a national TV game regardless of where this game was played. That's number one. Will it look better in AT&T Stadium? Probably. That I will say. It will probably look better, but it was going to be nationally televised. Also, look at the 2026 season as well. SMU opens up in a standalone game at Florida State. If the Florida State game goes SMU's direction and Louisville doesn't botch whichever first two games that it has, the SMU-Louisville game will be a ranked-on-ranked matchup in Week 3. That one will be nationally televised. Okay, so you've got those two games. Let's just get ambitious and say Virginia Tech is really good and outdoes expectations. As long as SMU holds up its end of the bargain, that game will have some national eyeballs on it. And then, obviously, SMU is going to Notre Dame. Now, 3 of those 4 games are on the road, yes. But if you're talking about exposure in the 2026 season leading up to that 2027 game against the Sooners, you're going to have your opportunity for that. Not to mention that if SMU ends up back in the ACC championship game or the college football playoff, the exposure continues to be there. So SMU, I do not think, once the 2026 season is over, is going to be lacking of exposure. That's why, ultimately, I feel like your best opportunity for branding is going to be at Ford Stadium. Because we don't need, by that point, we won't need to see, as long as SMU doesn't lose some radically, favored game. As long as they don't just lay an egg against a team that they should really beat, SMU is going to be exposed a lot to the national audience. So I don't think exposure in another stadium that's not theirs is going to be a necessity. I think that your best way to go about this is to bring people on campus in terms of recruits and prospective players. You bring all the national camera eyeballs to campus. Give us shots of the Boulevard. Give us shots of the Hilltop. Give us shots of Ford Stadium. That's what's going to expand your brand even more than what you're going to get in the 2026 season, because most of those games are going to be in Tallahassee or in Louisville, Kentucky, or in South Bend, Indiana, or if you make it to the ACC championship game, Charlotte, North Carolina, or in the college football playoff, wherever that may be. So, with all of that as the backdrop, that's why I would say your best opportunity for branding is going to be having that game in Dallas on the Hilltop against Oklahoma and against LSU. That's my thoughts. What are your responses? Keep them coming in the comments below. Hit me on Twitter at Gray_Singleton2. Would love to interact with all of you as we've done over the past 24 hours or so. Okay, coming up next, this scheduling change is a reason why I think scheduling, here's my big change. Scheduling should be taken out of the hands of the schools. Coming up next. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. So if I was hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can just help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in and hit the ground running and be productive. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that tells it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way. Do it with Indeed. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care the most about, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and then somehow get intense really, really fast, speed skating races that are defined by milliseconds and inches, and even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked in to the competition. And FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, welcome back to the show. Appreciate you guys making us your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Really helps us out on this show and at the company as well. So if you're new here on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Those of you on audio, appreciate you making us your first listen of the day as well. And here's my big change to college football. And this comes, I thought about this, and I've held this opinion for a long time. But I thought about this because I saw a lot of comments that correctly identified that the SEC is going to a 9-game conference schedule. Therefore, they don't want to play any other marquee opponents in true road games. Basically, the SEC, doing what it always does and bullying its way to getting what it wants and whatnot. That's outside the purposes of this conversation. But yes, you are correct. The SEC and Oklahoma and LSU would have just bought out of those games because, well, they're playing 9 games. Why play another one? I hear this all the time. And it bugs me to no end. One, because it's the SEC, and they can't be trusted with scheduling because they're going to go schedule a Tennessee Chattanooga or a Maine or whatever. Like, we all know how the SEC has traditionally done scheduling. But this is why scheduling should be taken out of the hands of the schools. I think it was Nick Saban. Maybe not Nick Saban, but there have been other people who have thrown this around that there needs to be, similar to the NFL, a scheduling committee. So we don't have one school and really one conference trying to strong arm everybody. Now, I know the SEC thinks it's, this big bad conference, which top to bottom the SEC is. Also need to remind the SEC that they haven't had a participant in the national championship in 3 years. Okay. The ACC has, the Big Ten has, okay, like 3 years since the last time. Hell, the Pac-12 has. And the Pac-12 was barely a conference last year. But I digress. Scheduling needs to be taken out of the hands of the schools. We have all these advanced metrics. We have 9-game schedules. We've got an expanded playoff. There's no need for schools to be saying, well, we kind of really don't want to play this game as a true road game, so either you move it to a neutral site or we're not playing it. Like, it was obviously solved the Notre Dame issue as well. And the big reason why, and when you guys started commenting this, it dawned on me. There are too many agendas at play, right? So the SEC said, we'll go to a 9-game conference schedule if we get assurances of a 16-team playoff, and we get this amount of qualifiers for the playoff. right? The Big Ten is doing its thing. The ACC is doing its thing. The Big 12 is doing its thing. Ultimately, we're going to compete in the same playoff to try to go win the same national championship. But along the way, there are too many agendas at play. The SEC trying to preserve itself and strong arm everything. Well, the Big Ten trying to say, what about us? The ACC trying to elevate itself and say, wait a minute, we're being disrespected. There's too many things pulling for something that is not the collective good. Because if there is one thing that we know for sure that has happened in these negotiations with these schedules, all right, we'll do this, if that, is that nobody is pulling for the collective good. It is for conferences and its member schools campaigning for things that benefit the good of those conferences and ultimately the schools. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. My thought has always been every Power 4 team should play at minimum 10 Power 4 games. Period. End of story. End of story. You play 10 Power 4 games. Now, as a result of expanding the conference schedules, another thing that has gone by the wayside, and on a lesser scale than I think I led on, is that traditional rivalries are gone. Like, look at the traditional rivalries that are out the window now. Oklahoma-Nebraska is no longer being played. Oklahoma State is Bedlam is no longer being played. That's one that I think should be played every single year. SMU and TCU, the Iron Skillet, is no longer there. We have done a good job preserving Clemson, South Carolina. Florida State has been preserved. Texas A&M went out the window for a while. Now it's coming back, thankfully. Notre Dame, USC, looks like that's going to be out the door too. So there is, as a result of the playoff and as a result of the conferences really getting too big, which I think we can all agree on, that these conferences are too big. As a result of all of that, you've got two things that have been a problem. Rivalries going out the window and nobody pulling for the collective good. Somebody needs to come over and come and take this over. Because there's no reason why a school should be able to say, all right, we'll just buy out of the game. Like, what kind of sense does that make? Like an NFL team can't just say, well, it looks like our schedule is going to be too difficult. Let's pay you and we'll, like the Patriots, who are going to, like, take the Patriots, for example, right? They just appeared in the Super Bowl. They had one of the weakest schedules for a Super Bowl team in the last, 50 years or something. Not their fault. But now they're going to play a first-place schedule. And their schedule is brutal next year. They can't go to, let's say, Chicago, who I think they have a road game against Chicago, and say, yeah, our schedule on the AFC side is looking like it's going to be tougher with Mahomes coming back and all that. Let's pay you a bunch of money and we'll just go play, I don't know, the Saints for that extra NFC game. Like this is silly. That's absolutely silly, right? And I don't think that should be happening in college. So how do you curb all that? You take scheduling out of the hands of the school. You have a scheduling committee, similar to what the NFL has. They use metrics to determine, all right, this is how you finish. This is how you finished last year. You're going to play a schedule that is commensurate to that. Does that mean you play every top 15 team? No. You spread it out, obviously. But you use that metric. You come up with a scheduling formula and criteria, and you meet that. And that includes 10 Power 4 games. If that 10th game is a traditional rival, throw it in there. I'll give you one cupcake game in there because college football has no preseason. You need a cupcake game in there. Give you a cupcake game, give you a high-level G5 game, try to preserve traditional rivalries, and we're set. I would not even mind playing 8 conference games, a high-level Power 4, an additional Power 4 game against a traditional rival, a high-level G5, and a cupcake game, like a team that you're going to be favored by 42 over. That is how I would do it. That's how I would do it. But scheduling needs to be out of the hands of the schools because there's no reason we should be talking about a game being moved to a neutral site off of a stadium because one team is going to a ninth conference game and say, well, we're just not going to play the game because our schedule is too hard. To me, when that comes out of my mouth, that's silly. And I know that's not the traditional way to think about college football. And it's like, that's not how college football has always been. To hell with that. To hell with that. The way college football has always done a lot of things is a little bit wonky. So with that as the backdrop, and we're talking about this game that SMU was not going to be able to play if it was not moved to AT&T Stadium. And by the way, if that is the case, which I believe it is, then you play the game at AT&T Stadium. You don't forfeit that game. You don't. You move it to AT&T Stadium if you're trying to be bullied into saying we're playing at a neutral site or we're not playing it at all. You absolutely play the game. You figure out a way to play the game. But if that is going to be the case, nah. Let's get rid of schools having unilateral control over their non-conference scheduling. Let's just get rid of it. Have a scheduling committee do it. Because there's too many agendas and too many people that are pulling for something other than the collective good. All right, coming up next, last segment here. Let's get into basketball. SMU taking on Syracuse. Boy, they need this one. They need this one, and they need to start fast in this game. I'll tell you why to close up the show next. But first, this is Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show there's more to the score than what's on the screen. These are plays that remind us of what it really takes to raise the bar. That extra work, dialing in that every detail, giving it that extra fire, and that grit that says, I never quit. And our example of this is going to be Jerron Pierre today. In that game against Notre Dame. Started off real slow. We knew Jerron Pierre was going to get hot, right? Like we knew that the halftime score, box score rather, for Jerron Pierre was not going to be indicative of his entire night. And he took flight, literally and figuratively, in that second half against Notre Dame. Ended up with a team-high 22 points on a good shooting night and electrified us with some highlights as well. And you know Jerron doesn't get to that level of play if he hadn't put in that extra work off the court. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. All right, welcome back to the show. Before we close things out, I want to tell you about our Everydayer Club. And as always, thanks for making us your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out the Everydayer Club. It'll get you an ad-free version of this here show. Yes, this show without any ads, compatible with Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, in addition to being able to hear us ad-free, you get members-only access to a Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show and others, plus some of our Locked On hosts as well at the podcast network. So you will love hanging out in that Discord server with everybody, with some of our hosts, exchanging thoughts as well. And you can do it all for just $5 a month or $50 for the entire year. So head to lockedonsmu.supercast.com or click the link in the description to learn more. Okay, final segment here before we close it up for the week. SMU is going to take on Syracuse. Quad 1 opportunity as it stands right now for SMU on the road against the Orange, a team that has been just up and down. You really haven't been able to make heads or tails of this team. They're going to fire Adrian Autry. Well, you would have thought, and now we've got an AD change up there at Syracuse, so you don't really exactly know what's going to happen over there. If you want to get more into the pulse of Syracuse, my buddy Jackson Holzer does an excellent job with Locked On Syracuse, can tell you more about it, but they've got an AD change. Everybody wants to fire the coach. It would be a minor miracle if he's coaching next season. But that's where Syracuse is. They've got some veteran players. They've got some guys that can score. They don't shoot the three ball, extra impressively like Notre Dame was, even though this is still an athletic team that likes to get up and down the floor. But when you're going to Syracuse, obviously they're going to have a ruckus crowd because basketball is what Syracuse lives for, and rightfully so. I mentioned Jerron Pierre in that last ad break. I want to see him get off to a good start. Maybe not a dominant start, but get off to a good start. And I think him getting off to a good start would be a good mix to what Boopie Miller showed in that game against Notre Dame. Because Boopie Miller looked his best in that game against the Irish since he came back from the illness. And I think Jerron getting off to a strong start, not exploding for 15 points. I mean, now if he does, that's great. But I'm not saying he needs to explode for 15 points in the first half. But with Boopie looking the way that he looked, if Jerron Pierre can get off to an efficient, let's just call it 4 of 6 start from the field, I think that helps SMU a lot. Because you got to look at those 4 of 6 that Jerron would get. Like, Jerron doesn't get boring baskets. Jerron gets baskets that deflate teams. Jerron gets baskets that excite his bench and incite momentum for the remainder of the game. Like, Jerron isn't just out here on the block hitting turnaround jumpers. No, Jerron's taking his man off the dribble, getting to his spot, doing what he wants to do, or he's knocking down a long three, or he's doing something athletic. Right. Things that are actually going to really get everybody on their feet. So, because of the way he does it, if you can combine that early in the game with how Boopie's going to orchestrate the offense, get everybody involved. Corey Washington has been a guy that starts games really well, and he really, sometimes his corner threes can set the tempo for everybody, can just get the offense settled into its flow. So with the way that we know SMU can start, I think Jerron getting off to an efficient start is going to be key in this game. I want to see that. Now, also, on the other side of the basketball, Syracuse can be a little bit, let's call it random. Because really, there is no making heads or tails about this team. I'm going to be completely honest with you. They are 14-11 on the season, 5-7 in ACC play. Yet somehow they figure out ways to hang with teams that you otherwise think they wouldn't. And sometimes they win some games in just wild fashion. They just knocked off Cal 107-100 in double overtime. Okay? Cal's a team on the bubble. They're still playing for something in terms of their NCAA tournament lives. And Syracuse found a way to beat them. After the last time we mentioned Syracuse, they benched Kai and Anthony for some reason. Don't really know. But this is going to be a team that's got athletes. They've got a guy in Donnie Freeman who is their leading scorer but has not played recently, has not played enough games to qualify, really, for the averages lead. So it looks like Syracuse at least has been handcuffed in that regard. But as a team, they shoot 33% from 3. So nothing to write home about. But they're athletic. They're guys that come from the AAU system, so they can get buckets. And I think on the road, if you can settle in defensively with this team against a team who has severely disappointed their home fan base, and you force them to go on a spurt where they don't make a lot of shots, that'll take the energy out of the arena. Believe me, it will. It'll take the energy out of the arena. So if you combine a stretch of defensive stops along with Jerron Pierre getting off to a more efficient start than he did in that Notre Dame game, I think you can, I think you can really do some damage in that place. Now, SMU has not been a team that, even though they'll end up winning comfortably against opponents that they should beat, they don't start out doing it. So I think that could be the next step to their growth, is that, okay, we've got a team that you should beat. Let's go ahead and try to separate early. Don't get outside of yourself. Don't get out of the flow of your game. But instead of being tied or it being a 2-point game at halftime, what if we can build a 10-point lead at halftime? Right. So that's something I'm looking for, because SMU is better than Syracuse. We know this. But can they separate earlier? Can they string together stop and scores to where they go on runs in the first half and not wait until the second half to have to do it. Again, something new that I'm watching for this team as you try to figure out ways that you can continue to improve and continue to improve before you get to the ACC tournament. So that's what I'm looking for tomorrow as SMU takes on Syracuse. All right, really good show here today. Let me know your thoughts on everything, scheduling changes, branding opportunities, and even the game tomorrow afternoon against Syracuse. Let me know in the comments below. You can find me on Twitter right there where you see it on the screen for those of you watching on YouTube. Make sure you check out our Everydayer Club as well, $5 a month or $50 for the entirety of the year. It'll get you some really good perks like ad-free versions to this show that's compatible with every major podcast distributor, plus members-only Discord access. So click the link in the show notes. That's how you find it to learn more. All right, we'll talk to you guys on Monday. Once again, take it easy, everybody.